Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about The Batman. This is the newest, Batman movie. Again, we're doing the dark, gritty, inspired by crime movie Batman thing, and that's what this movie is. Again, but it's a little better in a lot of ways at doing that, and it's different at doing that. Although, ultimately, are we that surprised by this being the kind of Batman we're getting? I guess we're getting the David Fincher Batman. I'm assuming they didn't ask David Fincher. This is probably going to be a spoiler review. It's been out for a little bit, so that's why I'm not doing a premiere or anything for it. I don't want to spoil you unintentionally. So if you're watching past this point, there might be spoilers. I'm just going to kind of go and review it, and I'm sorry about that, but when you haven't seen it, come back and watch it. Give me a thumbs up just because I was honest, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, at first I wasn't surprised by this, and I was a little disappointed, and I'm, to be honest, always disappointed that we still get, he's the Batman in all black. We're doing the dark mystery detective thing, and it's not that I hate these movies. I like this movie, and I like most of the Nolans, 2/3. I'm just there's other aspects of Batman we can do. I'm more of an animated series guy, probably. And so, that's the Batman. Who's the Batman I'm into? I sort of like it when it's just a detective story and it's lower stakes instead of the let's do this mystery and then at the end we'll do a big third act explodey thing with all of Gotham City's gonna fall apart sort of stuff, which seems to be a thing they all do. Every single one of them. Right? I think so. And it just gets a little much. It's you feel like you're falling into the same pattern. But unlike, I think, what a lot of those directors do, I think Matt Reeves leaned into it and knew how to use it in a good way. And as much as this film is, it feels like he understands the kind of Batman they want him to make and still made it artier and weirder. This is probably the biggest director auteur vision for a franchise film I have seen since The Last Jedi. In terms of, not saying good or bad or whatever, just saying the auteur, pure auteurness, not just auteur through, or the director's voice really, because auteur just means author, if we're all being honest here. I did a video, you can watch it, what is auteur theory, blah blah. But he's using his voice through understanding what the Batman should be now, what a Batman movie should be, but he's doing it in a way that makes me think he's more in control of it than the studio, even though that's probably a 50-50 if we're all being honest here. I like how it was shot in this darky, murkier way. I like how he did the cool action sequences, with the gun as the light source and the club, with the way Batman punches people, it feels raw. People punching each other, not feeling as well choreographed as previously. Even the way they shoot the car chase sequence, it's all cut up and weird, but not in the green grass way, in a way that oh shit, I think this guy's seen more movies than these auteurs I've had sitting around the past couple years. I also think this guy's read a significant amount of comic books and Batman comic books and understands what a Batman movie would be in 2022, and he leans into that. And I think I was thinking about this I've been watching comic book movies for a long time, since I was 7 or something, and I've been talking about the adaptation of them for most of my life, because I grew up reading comic books and stuff, and it used to be they were all very bad, and the adaptations, they'd have to change things because they couldn't do stuff. And obviously that's not true anymore. It's changed, and they took over Hollywood and stuff like that. But in this movie, in The Batman, it feels like the reason the Riddler is the Zodiac Killer, the reason Batman is dressed a certain way, the reason all these things is not because they're embarrassed of Batman necessarily. It's because that is the artistic theory of the whole film, which I think is a radically different way to do it, because it felt more, I would say, where you get Singer and his decision with the X-Men, or you get, well, let's just say Singer, I can't think of another one off the top of my head. It felt like they were embarrassed. I almost felt like Nolan was like that too. Whereas I feel like Matt Reeves is not embarrassed that this is a Batman movie. He's trying to get the Batmanness to work. It feels weird that Batman's with all the cops in those scenes. It feels as often as strange. Hey, Gotham City, you heard they have this mass vigilante who helps the cops and shit. That's strange, but okay. it feels like that, but it feels like they also like understand he needs to be there because he'll figure it out. The realism's there, but the weird surrealist comic booky stuff is still in there as well. Like he sort of didn't let go of either and played them perfectly. You know, as much as I think we try to do Batman stuff, like they're crime movies basically, and crime movies are obviously very realistic. I think the realism that Nolan tried to achieve, Matt Reeves is sort of not. It's like he knows this is a fake world and he's playing and messing around with it, and it looks realistic, but like, you know, Gotham Square Garden and all those things, like if you really think about it, it is kind of like a cartoon or like a comic book, and he did it in the realism way. It's almost like he understood how to meld it better than I think a lot of directors have. And I do like how they use the Fincher stuff. I don't actually think Fincher would have done it this way. I did find the mystery that we're going along with to be very intriguing and inviting, and like got me through a lot of that 3-hour runtime, which did kind of run out of steam, I think, a little bit towards the end, but it really intrigues you. It's like one of the few times I watched a Batman movie, and like one of these, especially like with the Nolan ones, the mysteries would get a little convoluted, and I would like forget who the gangsters were, and it really wouldn't matter. And this, it felt like Matt Reeves wanted you to care about the mystery, and did. That's done with casting, like when you get someone like John Turturro playing Falcone. You have, you know, Colin Farrell, who is, I've always said, like, not the best lead, but an amazing supporting actor, and of course he's great in this, playing the Penguin. He's always good at supporting. Like, he should never do lead. I've always hated that, but him doing supporting is out of this world, and of course he's great in this. But since you know these central figures, and he centrals it around people you know, and anyone who's sort of forgettable. I think like the original commissioner gets killed real early, and like I barely understood who he was or cared, and then he's dead, so it's like fine. But like the rest of them who matter are done by these like really cool, like John Turturro is like a gangster. That's amazing casting, and he's great, and you want to see him, and you're wondering about him. And it's not just because he got like very charismatic leads. He understood, like, casting wise, how to get them that way. It does feel like I'm in most of the Batman stuff, when you have mob bosses, it really just feels like you barely remember them. But even having like the twins in the club and things like that, he like really made it so I gave a shit about each of the gangsters and the mob and all that stuff. So they almost felt like the real villains, more so than Catwoman and Penguin, and I guess the Riddler really was. I liked Robert Pattinson as Batman. He's sort of playing like if, I guess, Kurt Cobain did Ether in the silent film era. That's who he is. I was a little confused because he's sort of like, he's playing more of this like rich recluse, which is sort of like not what, it's like a weird take on Batman, because that's not the Bruce Wayne I have always grown up with. Is like this guy who's like pretending to be this playboy guy who's a man about town who cares about Gotham, and then at night he's Batman and is all those edgy things, and sort of like the split personality thing. And in this, it feels like, I mean, he's newer at it. This is like year 2, although I keep saying they're influenced by year 1, and I'm like fairly certain there's a Batman year 2, so I was a little confused about that one. But his early on, so maybe he's like sort of figuring it out, but apparently he's like super reclusive anytime they're talking about it. But I thought he did a very good job as Batman. It did feel like the least, you know, it's funny, I think his performance is like this movie in a lot of ways, because it's not necessarily like as showy as like the, you know, Bale Nolan era, or the Keaton Burton era, or the Schumacher Kilmer Clooney or, you know, Affleck Snyder, or anything. Those, because those guys are like very much like acting with a capital fucking A. Like, I'm acting so hard right now, I'm Batman, I'm acting so hard, I'm really acting, guys. That's how I imagine them. But Pattinson hasn't, all those guys were doing Hollywood stuff. You know, Pattinson has done Hollywood stuff, but he sort of hasn't for like a couple of years, and you can tell he's like doing these indie movies and stuff like that, and doing, you know, these smaller, weirder performances, and coming to Batman much more as like, hey, this is another role. Like he's probably playing it more like the functional character actor than anyone has played it so far, because he plays it like Reeves does. Is like, they understand the economy of a Batman film, and the reason that exists, and what the studio wants, and how can they do what they're going to do within it, and they'll be okay with it, and you be able to do your artistic thing. It's honestly, what he's doing and what Reeves are doing is more close to classic Hollywood studio director stuff, what they would get away with in the 30s and 40s, and the studio wouldn't realize, and they'd be happy, and the studio was like, I made my money, I don't care, and this movie's halfway decent. That's honestly what I think they did, and they really do feel like, I don't think Reeves or Pattinson are working class. It feels like more of that working class actor. Like, this is another job. I know how to do this effectively, and I'm going to do it. And that's, I don't think it's a showy performance. I don't think it's showy direct. Well, it is kind of showy direct in the way he's shot and everything like that. But Pattinson doesn't, it's not necessarily a showy role. And Batman can, in certain stories, not be. I will say in certain places, like his arc, the whole arc, which I'll sort of get to in a little bit, I almost sort of wish, I feel like he could be the only Batman who does a whole Batman movie and there's no arc to Batman. Like, do we need an arc? Like, not in every Batman story they go like, oh, the weight of my parents. Like, it feels a little forced at a certain point. Like, you either go full, like he's crying in front of his parents' grave as Mask of the Phantasm, or you shut the fuck up, in terms of my understanding. It's just like, we do it too much. Like, it's just like, we get it, his parents are, it's like, I get it. Zoe Kravitz, I guess most people just discovered she's really hot. I'm super confused where all y'all were. Were you blind until recently? I don't get it, but this is definitely like a star-making role for her. Colin Farrell is amazing, as well as Jeffrey Wright. Jeffrey Wright's just great being Jeffrey Wright, but he is so good at playing either Felix Unger or Commissioner Gordon. He's just like a perfect guy to play a sidekick and a guy who like fucking loves it. And it sounds like he chills with Batman. Like, I think he called him man or something. Someone should make a how men relate to each other article and how that relates to Commissioner Gordon and Batman. I would be into that. There's probably like a whole thing about that, honestly, or how we understand men talk to each other and how it relates to those two. There's probably like you could make a whole video essay on that, I think. Paul Dano was fine. It felt like he wanted it to be a great performance, and I don't know. I have mixed feelings about, like, to me it like sort of doesn't feel like the Riddler. I used to really like the Riddler as a kid and his dumb riddles and stuff, but he feels like more serial killer than Riddler, and I get the reason they did that, but to me it's like sort of not the Riddler in a lot of ways. I liked it. It's just not what I like most about Dano as an actor. I feel like he's actually a little better when he's sort of funny, and he wasn't. It was funny. His character has, like, they say 500 followers on, they don't specify if he's on Twitch or I think it's Instagram Live from what it looked like, or Facebook Live or whatever. It really went far with you ever heard that thing, like, you could have a successful YouTube channel or a successful social media following if you have one viewer and they pay you like $1 million a video or $1 million a year, you're very successful. And in theory, yes, but no one's like, what? Like, it's like, that sounds like a very specific case, and they use that to such a ridiculous degree with his 500 followers going into the ending, where those people are like inspired, they're using Capitol Rights things and stuff like that. I'm wondering if that was already in there before that, because this was originally shooting before that, so I'm curious if that changed. But that seemed to be, I think, a lot of the ending. Like, it felt to me like, and you expose this stuff and you tell the press, and that's over, and that's the movie spotlight, so we can go home, guys. Like, we uncovered Gotham, and then he was like, no, I'm gonna flood the shit out of it, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess. I was sort of let down by the ending, because it did feel like we have to have a third act thing, and I find it less and less fun to watch huge disasters happen with people in movies. Like, we could just do a mystery. You don't need to remind me of all the various hardships of life while I'm watching this. Like, it seems to be a DC problem, because the same thing happened to me with Man of Steel. Like, people are crying because it reminded them of 9/11. I was like, Jesus, guys, like, I want to watch a Superman movie. Like, calm the fuck down. Like, and the flooding thing I felt like was like too far, but ultimately I liked what it said in the end. And I was thinking about this, and I watched Dom Griffith, who is he is my favorite YouTube critic. I would say, like, solo critic who does stuff like I do them. I think he's really great. He's probably someone who influences me a lot currently. You should check out his channel. It's Armchair Auteur. He's great. I think he knows, I think that, but if not, anyway, he's a wonderful critic. He did a spoiler one and a non-spoiler one. And then the spoiler one, he was talking about how this felt good to see this movie. And when I saw it, I was more thinking about, like, I liked it, and it was fun seeing the movie, and, it's nice seeing a Batman movie, but I kind of don't get, I guess, when this and Spider-Man came out, when people would say those things, because I know movie critic-wise, people are going, oh, every Spider-Man movie's good, every Batman movie's good in a way, because it had Batman, and like real critic people, not just fans. And that kind of bothered me. I know people are like wanting to be more positive with criticism now, which I don't think is like, I think if you're going too far either way, you fucked up on it. But I kind of then thought when he was talking about it, how these movies sort of represent something to us. And I think we've had, I'd say, a really tough 2 years, because we're coming on the 2-year anniversary of the beginning of the pandemic in America. I think when most of the world really shut down, I think in most of you watching this, I know there are exceptions and I'm not, anyway, but what these films represent, I think what superheroes represent, and I think what sometimes these movies represent to me when I'm going through a hard time, is you see them for the first time and you're like, that is amazing. I have like some faith in humanity. This is going to keep me going. I remember specifically like when I saw Black Panther, that was that for me. Like I was not having a great time, and that like helped get me through a couple weeks, you know. And he was talking about that with the Batman, and I've heard people talk about it with Spider-Man. And I was thinking about this with this film. In the end, Batman's wondering why he's doing this, why he is being Batman. Like he's questioning it. And it's not like Spider-Man 2 levels, but it's not super, you know, he's solving the mystery and there's the thumb drive. That was a good joke. I forgot to mention it. He realizes in the end he wants to save people. He wants to do good. There's a reason he does this heroism. There's a reason he wants to protect people. And what started him off in this path, he wants to protect people. He wants to make sure what happened to him doesn't happen to anyone else. In the end, I think what this movie is sort of saying is like ultimately, like, why have another dark, gritty Batman movie? We don't really need those. I know financially Warner's or Discovery Media, Warner Brothers, AT&T does maybe, but cinematically, what more are we saying? And I don't know if this fully answers that. I think this is a greatly made film and probably one of the best Batman. I'd say it's like up there, but it's not introducing too much completely new. But I think what it is trying to say is maybe we just sort of need this to keep us going. Maybe the people who like these movies, this is like, maybe not necessarily like their whole reason for living, but, you know, Russia's invading Ukraine, like, you know, what's going on in America anyway. We're all having to go pretend the pandemic's over. If it's not, everyone's scared all the time. And maybe we're giving you sort of a glimmer of hope by having just a good, stupid detective movie. And maybe there's some honor in these films, and maybe that's why superhero films happen in general nowadays anyway, because like I remember seeing Age of Ultron, and the city I grew up in was, you know, there was the Baltimore uprising at the same time, and I have probably too much like for that movie, probably because of that, because it's like scary and weird and you're not sure what's gonna happen and you're upset and there's nothing you can really do. And I think maybe like what this film is talking about is like, maybe we don't need a Batman film in some respects, but maybe we actually, for our souls and so forth, need it to just get us through. Maybe we need a Batman movie that gives us some glimmer of hope. Batman needed that glimmer of hope. We needed that glimmer of hope. No Way Home gave us that as well. But I think what this film is ultimately saying is, even though, look, superhero movies aren't going to change, maybe it won't change cinema for the better. Maybe him doing the best David Fincher impression, well, very David Fincher influence, sorry, and shooting it in this interesting way isn't going to change comic book movies. Maybe we're just kind of treading water here, but we're giving you that glimmer of hope. We're trying our hardest. It's good you got through the day, and maybe you'll never, like Catwoman says to him, you'll never change Gotham, and maybe we're not going to change the world, and maybe this is just like a glimmer of hope, as we all got knocked down again by some other bullshit horrible thing. But maybe it's pretty cool to have some faith in a stupid Batman again, and, you know, feel kind of good about like, hey, Batman's cool, and, you know, maybe there's some honor in that. And I kind of feel like the Batman in the end is really talking about that. It's like there's some honor in trying to help people. You know, he might have let those people get all swept up, but he tried to bring them all out again with his little flair, and realizing that heroism, like, this is one of the few Batman movies that really talks about how heroism is a good thing, and maybe there's some heroism in just kind of getting people through and having a nice little detective story to help you go through the week. And I think maybe that's what Batman as a character was always supposed to be, from the end of the Great Depression through World War II for us now. And maybe that's where we're all still attracted to him. Or maybe he's just a cool guy wearing a cool suit fighting crimes. But I feel like this movie knows there's a reason this legend and this fictional character has lasted. Maybe he means a little bit more to us, and maybe that's a really cool thing. So if you've seen The Batman and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.